change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. And change will come to you. Be the voice you want to hear in the world. Be the voice you want to hear in the world. Be the voice you want to hear in the world. And change will come to you. Be the light you want to shine in the world. Be the light you want to shine in the world. Be the light you want to shine in the world. And change will come to you. And change will come to you. And change will come to you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Calgary Unitarians community. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your journey of faith or search for meaning, welcome. If you are here for the first time or the first time in a long time, know we are grateful to have you with us. As our statement of purpose says, we come together in beloved community to grow in wisdom, welcome and deepen relationships, and act for a just and sustainable world. My name is Alan Waugh, and I have the privilege of serving on your board of trustees. Why am I a Unitarian Universalist? Because I feel I am at one with a timeless community of souls, each free to believe what reason and insight reveal as true. A community where my spirit soars in moments of song and insight. Let us now, wherever we are, remember and acknowledge the traditional territories of all those whose ancestors were here before us. We of the Calgary Unitarian community live on the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The peoples and languages of Treaty 7 include the Blackfoot First Nations of Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and the Dene First Nation band, the Tsuut'ina. We are also in the homeland of the historic Northwest Métis and of Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We acknowledge that we are all treaty people. After the service, please stay for coffee time. Catch up with community and friends. Now to Reverend Deborah for the lighting of our chalice.
Good morning. I light our chalice with these words. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. With this, I light our chalice. It is so good to be together, even though we can only do it virtually at this time. I'm so grateful for this community, so grateful for the many people that it takes to pull us together in this way. I want to acknowledge Christopher and Jim, our AV team. Even though there's glitches, there is such grace in how we just move through it. And I thank Bob also for getting the video up online for those unable to be here or so touched by the words that you hear that you want to hear them again. I want to thank Wendy for being our coffee host today, and Ev and Mady for the PowerPoints that just hold the whole service together. I want to thank the singers who we almost got to hear, and you'll get to hear them at some point, and Alan for the greeting from our amazing board of trustees who are working behind the scenes in ways that most of us don't even realize. I want to acknowledge our staff as well. Our music director, Jane Perry, and director of children and youth programs, Sheila McMaster, both of whom you'll be hearing from. I wanted to just talk briefly about the fact that we're coming up to the Christmas season, and normally as a community, we would be reaching out and finding ways to help support those particularly in need at this time. And so we're working on that, and I'm calling it Christmas Elves. We're trying to figure out ways to do the mitten tree, even though we won't be together. How can we support Christmas hampers, although hampers may not be the way this year? And how do we take care of each other during this season? If you're interested in being part of the Christmas Elf team, please be in touch with me. I look so forward to how our generosity, the generosity of spirit that is expressed so often in this community, will manifest itself in this season. And now I invite our music director, Jane Perry, to offer a few words.
Good morning, friends. It's good to be together with you in this virtual environment once again. All of the music in today's service speaks of agency, this idea that we have the power to create positive change in the world around us, and moreover, that creating that positive change takes a little bit of work. First, though, it's important to be open to the possibilities, and our first song this morning reflects that in spades. Let's sing together, Holly Mears, I Am Willing.
It love that song, Jane. Thank you. That was great. And it's so good to be here and see all of you. I've been away for a couple weeks. I had some minor surgery the beginning of November. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who sent healing energy and kind thoughts. I had a few people who were actively doing that for me during my time. And I feel like it really made a difference. And if you're thinking, oh no, I wanted to send Sheila some kind thoughts, it's not too late. The nice thing is you can just close your eyes now, send them off. And if there's someone else on your list, you can send them off to right now. Oh, that was very nice. Thank you for that one. And so the nice thing is, sometimes when you think, oh, I want to send joy or I want to send something, just send it energetically and you'll be surprised that people can feel it. And today it's a little different. I'm wearing my hair down and I haven't had a haircut since March. And I want to talk about how as we move into winter, there's a heaviness on our hearts for some of us, and mine included, a little bit of grief, sometimes for big things, sometimes for little things like no haircuts. And so today with the children and youth, we're going to be talking about what is on our hearts, how are we feeling, and what can we do to get some of that connection that we might be missing. And so today we're going to be playing some online games. Some good ones you might not know of is like Scribble.io. That one's very fun. We have to draw the picture of a word and people have to guess what the word is, and that's always good. And there's also board games online if you don't know about this yet. And so we're going to be doing that with the youth today. And one thing really positive out of this time is that we're doing a lot of collaboration with other congregations. And so the DRE Alara up at the Westwood Edmonton, we're collaborating so that we now have a weekly youth games night, 7 p.m. on Thursdays. And we also have our own dedicated Unitarian Minecraft server. So we're going to be doing Minecraft activities with the youth and with the kids. And I already have a volunteer lined up who's going to recreate our church building virtually in Minecraft. So we're very excited about that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And, you know, I think of all the things that I'm sad about right now and that I might be grieving, but then I'm finding that there's also these positives. And a lot of those positives are all of you and feeling really held in this community. So I want to say thank you. And now I invite Reverend Deborah to lead us into our centering time.
Thank you, Ashley, thank you, Sheila, and it's so good to have you back again. I said Ashley because the words that I offer this morning to take us into our centering time are by Ashley Horan. And following the words, I'll invite a time of silent reflection, and then there will be a musical response. So I invite you to settle in, to just take a moment to center yourself. And I offer these words. How is it with your soul? This is the question that John Wesley, Anglican priest and founder of Methodism, was known to ask of participants in small reflection groups. I ask you because, for me, this has been a hard week. So, beloveds, how is it with your soul? If your response to that question is anything like mine, I want to invite you to pause. Take a deep breath. Say a prayer, sing a song, light your chalice. Feel the force of gravity pulling us all toward the same center. Whatever helps you feel more rooted and less alone. Now do it again, and again, and again. And once you feel that rootedness and connection, hear this. You are loved beyond belief. You are enough. You are precious. Your work and your life matter. And you are not alone. You are a part of a we, a great cloud of witnesses, living and dead, who have insisted that this beautiful, broken world of ours is a blessing worthy of both deep gratitude and fierce protection. Our ancestors and our descendants are beckoning us, compelling us onward toward greater connection, greater compassion, greater commitment to one another and to the earth. Together, we are resilient and resourceful enough to say yes to that call, to make it our life's work in 1,000 different ways, knowing that we can do no other than bind ourselves more tightly together and throw ourselves into the holy work of showing up again and again, to be part of building that world of which we dream, but what we have not yet seen. Feeling centered and grounded now in this time and space with each other, we take time to acknowledge and recognize joys and concerns held in us individually and for us as a community. And so we take time to light candles, for lighting up the world is something we have the capacity to do. And today I would like to light our global candle for the global experience we are all in the midst of. And as we prepare and are headed and are in the second wave of COVID, it is one of those things to recognize that we share this experience with people all around the world. And so I light our global candle for our connection to each other throughout this planet, and also to those who are working so steadfastly to keep us safe and to find a vaccine. For this, I light our global candle. We acknowledge also concerns within our own community. There are members in the hospital, and we send our collective healing energy to them. Sheila so adequately and beautifully put it, how much it makes a difference that we send our energy out to those in need. There are also those with concerns for heading back into this isolation, the mental health challenges that it brings. May we figure out ways to reach out and to connect with each other, with our families and with our friends, even with the limitations that we have. I light this candle of concern and invite you as I do so to speak the concerns for particular individuals that you may have in your own lives. I light our candle of concern. And such is the stuff of life, there is also joys in our community and in our lives. I particularly want to acknowledge coming to the end of a semester for those at university and in schools. May the final end of the term be joy-filled and not too stressful. There's joys of birthdays and anniversaries that are happening right now as well. And as I light our candle of joy, I invite you to speak aloud the joys that are resting in your own family, on your heart at this moment. With this, I light our candle of joy. One of the great joys that we have are welcoming friends and visitors in our midst. And so I extend a special welcome to those who are here for the first time or the first time in a long time, and invite you to please stay and join us for coffee following the service. Another joy is that there is going to be a Jazz on the Side concert coming up next Friday night, and I encourage everyone to attend. And with that, I'll introduce Jane to introduce our song.
This next piece, We'll Build the Land, music was written by Carolyn McDade, who's also the composer of our closing benediction each week, Spirit of Life. There's a line in this hymn that I just love, and it talks about justice rolling down like waters. Of course, I believe it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. who said that justice is what love looks like in public. It's a powerful line. It's a powerful sentiment. Let's sing this one together. We'll build the land.
Go free, where the oil of gladness desires.
too love that song. Words from Amos, the "Let justice roll down like water." It is just my absolute delight to welcome Ryan Anderson here this morning. He and I were reflecting that we've been working together now for 10 years, for a decade. Ryan's work has centered around the question of how can we address the issues of our world, not just at a surface level, but at their roots. Pursuing this question has led Ryan to live in places such as the Thunderchild First Nation Reserve and to Guatemala, to study at Augustana University, and to live in the Taizé monastic community in France. And he studied for his Master's of Divinity at Harvard. As part of his studies, Ryan was introduced to the practice of community organizing and found it a powerful means by which people and organizations can come together to transform communities. Ryan has used these skills in a variety of settings, from helping organize Canada's interfaith conversation to equipping leaders of a parish to develop partnership with immigrants around food. Ryan currently serves as the lead organizer of the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good. He is married and has 2 delightful children, both of whom remind him regularly of what really matters. And I delight when I see them appear on the screen for some of our meetings. Ryan was trained as a Lutheran pastor, and so he finds great resource and asks inspiration in biblical text. And he asks that I share this text from Micah 6 to introduce his words. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings and calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgressions, the fruit of my body for the sins of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Please welcome Ryan Anderson.
Okay, thank you, everyone. In my tradition, I usually begin with a prayer, so let us pray together or have a moment of silence. Gracious Lord, bless this time. Open our hearts and our minds so each of us hear what the Spirit has for us this day. Give us guidance and wisdom and nourishment. Amen. Let's see if we can get the technology working. There you go. Is that working? Great. So actually, thank you very much for welcoming me back. This is, I think, the 3rd time I've been asked to speak here. It's always a compliment if people actually invite me back. And I thought I would use this time to actually reflect just a little bit deeper on some of my own reflections, and also reflections of my own tradition and how this flows into community organizing. And really what I want to reflect on today started off with a very interesting experience I had. I was invited to be a part of this conference on reconciliation that was organized largely by Indigenous peoples. And they were very explicit about I was invited there to be the token white guy, which was kind of interesting and fun. And in the midst of this conference, this one woman stood up and she began to quote an elder who had said, "You people in the West, something happened to you a long time ago. You see, it is the women who hold the connection to the spirit and the land, and at some point you turned on your women, and in the process you broke this connection to the spirit and to the land. and he became ill. And he'd been spreading this illness all around the world ever since. Now, those words struck me to my very heart, and I've been wrestling with them ever since. It's really forced me to go back into my own tradition and to have conversation with people outside my tradition as well. And as I've done this, what has become very clear is that a break did happen. So you look at some of the very early texts, there was this shift that happened, at least within my Christian tradition, as it transformed from really being a Jewish religious movement to being a religion of empire. Now, I know I'm speaking to a Unitarian congregation or community, and with that, I know some people are uncomfortable or may find it uncomfortable with me talking about Christianity, but it is my tradition. And I always figure if you're going to be critical, you need to be critical of your own tradition first. But then also just know that as I speak about this, I'm also speaking about the broader Western spiritual tradition that we are all a part of. The reality is Christianity has been one of the most dominant forms of this. And because of this, it's shaped all of our perceptions of how we regard the spiritual life. And it's interesting because as I've reflected on what I've been learning with both Buddhist teachers from India as well as Jewish rabbis, all of them speak about this twisting of our spiritual life that often happens when it gets brought into this Western culture. Now, the woman who spoke that day about the connection between the land and the spirit being broken when we turned on women is absolutely right. But as I've looked into this, I've discovered that something else happened around the exact same time. Something that is also important along with those other breaks. And that is there was a turning of spirituality into a focus on the individual. That is a shift from the communal and the collective to a spirituality that is personal and individual. I want to speak a little bit also about how community organizing is a bit of what I see as the antidote to, in some ways, a part of this illness that we collectively suffer from. But to do this, I'm trained academically, so I think sometimes historically. And so when I was thinking about this, the person that I think about a lot is this person, St. Augustine of Hippo. Now, St. Augustine is a fascinating figure. He is, perhaps within Western Christianity, there is no one more influential than him than perhaps maybe St. Paul and Jesus. But interestingly enough, in Eastern Christianity, he's almost completely rejected. Now, if you ever watch a movie where the main story is about how someone sort of messes up or is struggling, and that comes along to a place where suddenly something happens and the person is transformed and suddenly life becomes good. You know, this classic story of individual redemption. If you ever watch a movie about that, they're actually quoting Augustine. And you see, because Augustine's, one of his most influential books was called The Confessions. And yes, if you noticed, Augustine was actually an African man. But in the West, we've always seemed to picture, when we draw paintings of him, we paint him as this old white guy, which is quite interesting in and of itself, I'm sure. Or I'm sure it is for all of you. But what's interesting about Augustine's Confessions is it was the very first spiritual autobiography in the West. And when he wrote this book, he basically wrote about how when he was a youth, how he was this wayward youth, right? How he was a follower of heresies. He was a womanizer, a bit of a thief as well too. But then suddenly he came to the true faith and his life was transformed. He suddenly found joy and peace and everything else and eventually became the Bishop of Hippo. Now, what I want you to focus here in this is the focus. It was his personal spiritual journey. It was his personal sin. It was his personal story of redemption and his personal story of salvation. I'm sure you've heard this similar arc again and again. You see, later in the modern era, what happens is it gets picked up by Descartes, this turn to the self, and of course becomes I think, therefore I am. And in spirituality, it gets picked up by this guy, Martin Luther, who was a young man who was tormented by his own guilt and by a father who was incredibly overbearing and demanding. And Luther has this center on his own personal sin and salvation, and then this focus on the individual gets passed along to most of the other reformers, and with it, to most of our Western tradition again. And today we can see it in actually the spiritual marketplace that is now out there. You know, read my book, do this meditation, attend this retreat by yourself, and suddenly you'll find happiness, peace, success, whatever. One of my university friends, Rinpoche Tenzin Priyadarshi Shuka, who now heads up the Dalai Lama Center for Transformative Ethics, likes to refer to it as McMeditation and McMindfulness. This focus on the individual, this focus on I, me. It's Augustine, at least Augustine's followers, again and again and again, individualized spirituality. Now, what's important to know about Augustine is Augustine became very prominent because Augustine was the person who, in effect, was able to reconcile this early Christian movement with the Roman Empire. He was able to bring it into the Roman Empire, in part because he made it an individual spirituality. In effect, when spirituality becomes individualized, all of its revolutionary potential gets safely tucked away within our psychology. Much like Augustine himself, who when he was baptized actually held his sword hand out of the water so he could continue to conquer. When we tuck spirituality as just an individual thing, what we create space for is to allow our world to continue to be violent, to continue to exploit, to continue to be centered around greed. But of course, spirituality is just a personal, private affair. Interestingly enough, my first opening of my eyes that there may be a different spiritual tradition actually happened through, interestingly enough, another Lutheran theologian. This guy, his name is Christer Stendel. A little fun story. He looks very stern. He's actually a very kind and loving man, but he had a medical thing and his neck got fused. And when they asked him what direction he wants to look for the rest of his life, he held up a book and said, "I want to look like this." So he spent the rest of his life in every picture looking grumpy, when in reality, he was very loving. But he was also a brilliant scholar. And as I said, Paul is one of the most influential theologians really in the Western Christian tradition. And Stendel went back and looked at Paul, but not through the view of Augustine and Luther, but actually the texts again and what they meant to their context. And what he realized was that Paul was not talking about, personal sin and salvation, but rather was talking about how these non-Jewish people could be reincorporated into the people of Israel and their collective promise. It was actually talking about a collective spirituality, about being a part of a people and a shared promise. You see, in the Western tradition, actually in the broader spiritual tradition, there continues to be an alternative spiritual tradition. William Bellegarde, a Cree knowledge keeper and elder, once taught me that you need to go back to your creation stories. And so following him, I went back to the creation stories. And so in my tradition, there are two creation stories. People often think there's one, but there's two side by side. Now, one of them is actually this beautiful story. It's a story of this God who literally takes Adam, that actually means mud or dirt or earth. and picks it up and intimately forms it, and then with the intimacy of a kiss, breathes life, which is actually ruach, or actually the very spirit of God, into that. It's this story of intimate relationship between what is of the earth and what is of the spirit that ultimately connects us to all things. It's a story of relationships. The other creation story is one of chaos. That then, when it is combined once again with spirit, but then with wisdom. In the West, the word actually also is rooted in the word for wisdom. It's this divine wisdom then orders this creation in such a way that life can flourish. It's actually where we get the concept of justice from. And also shalom, which is a peace, which both means wholeness and harmony. It's actually relationships. It's all about this intricate relationships that are guided by wisdom. And then later on in the prophetic tradition, this is what you hear again as well too, where interesting enough, what we've forgotten is actually in the prophetic tradition is when people do not follow justice, it is actually creation that suffers as well too. And when people follow lives of justice, then creation is also in harmony. There are people who saw our relationships both with the spirit and with the divine, and how we lived our lives collectively and individually tied with all of nature. It was all connected. It was the spirituality of the whole. And this word justice is fascinating. So back to my academics. When the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, as well as in the Christian scriptures, the word for justice is this, dikaiasonin. Now, my pronunciation in Greek is not so great. But what's fascinating about this word is that it equally means this proper ordering ourselves as individuals, which is what is translated as righteousness. And it equally means the well-ordering of us collectively as a society, which is justice, of course. Now, what happens, it's interesting at least in almost every single English translation of the Bible, is that only one of those meanings are used. Righteousness, the individual meaning. And what gets dropped off, of course, is justice, this notion that our spirituality and our spiritual life is shared. It's collective, and it's even political. But this notion of course, of a shared spiritual life is not gone completely. Let's think of the word love, like these other important spiritual words. Love is inherently relational. And as someone mentioned before, it's been quoted by many people, it sounds like including Martin Luther King Jr., that justice is simply love in public life. There's a political element to it as well too. But think about these other spiritual words. Compassion is to suffer with, con and passion. Or peace, if understood from shalom, it is this harmony amongst everything. And even if we think about truth and wisdom, they're also relational terms, because if it's just something in your head, it is delusion, it's not wisdom. Once again, in the Christian scriptures, we see this translation. The kingdom of God is within you. It's one of the more famous lines that Jesus spoke. Except for that's not what it says. What it actually says is the word in Greek is the kingdom of God is within you and amongst you. Yes, our spiritual life, there is this part of it that is individual. It's about our individual transformation. It is this life of the Spirit within us, but it is equally about how the Spirit moves amongst us and how we shape that shared collective spiritual life. Which is why I chose that reading from the prophet Micah, that verse is often actually seen as the summary of the prophetic tradition. What does Yahweh require of us? To do justice. That is a political term. That is, what is the right relationship or right ordering of relationships in our community? Next word is Hasad, loving kindness. That is having this nature of loving kindness in our interpersonal relationships. And of course, to walk humbly with your God is a relational description between us and the divine. This is why congregations like yours, or sort of communities, as you like to say, like yours, are so important. You have to forgive me. I'm very used to calling these things congregations instead of communities. But this is why your community is so important. As it is in these spiritual communities that our spirituality becomes not just individual, but shared. And that's a part of it happens in the wonderful, beautiful, caring things that happen in our communities. But it also happens in the hard parts of our communities and how we look at our collective shadows. That's actually why the work you folks are doing around racism is so inspiring. Equally, it's also how we deal with the challenges of our interpersonal life. You know, often when that interpersonal dynamics are so often hard within our communities, that's actually deep spiritual work because it's working out how the Spirit flows amongst us. Also why I marvel at the power of a casserole being dropped off at someone's house when they're mourning or struggling. It's profound spirituality because it's shared. It's also why I left parish ministry to take on this role as the organizer for the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good. Because what I found in the community organizing tradition was something that could perhaps revive both our parish ministries, our community ministries, as well as the way in which the Spirit can again enter into our public life, and to bring back our shared collective call to a spirituality of justice. See, what's essential to community organizing, as actually Deborah reminds me again and again, and also and I think as every time I'm with you, I realize it's not just Deborah, it is your community together that is reminding of this, is that relationships are at the heart and center of it all. It isn't how we listen to each other. It's how we love each other, how we see the potential within each other and help each other grow, and how we each bring out each other's strengths. It is this relational focus that is the very heart of the community organizing practice and what it tries to call us all back to putting at the heart of our community's lives. But it is then how this actually interpersonal focus shifts to being collective through actually a practice that we call house meetings. I also find this like spiritual, almost magic occurs. Because you see, something amazing happens when we talk together about our suffering and we realize that it's not just my suffering, but that it's our suffering, that it's shared, that I'm not alone. It's not just my personal fault. And then when we realize it's shared, we begin to realize, well, maybe it's not even just us. Maybe these are questions of justice. But because we're no longer just sitting by ourselves, we also discover something else, that we are actually responsible, not guilty, responsible, which means we have the ability to respond. We have the ability to respond because you bring your strength. You bring your experience, you bring your energy, you bring your time, we all bring our own little bit of what we have been gifted with, and suddenly together we have this power to take action for justice, to address those bigger issues that we all face together. But then something else happens when we even step further out into our diversity. Two things happen. One is we actually collectively gain enough power to actually begin to shape our collective life, but we also gain this ability to see into our blindness. On our own, in our own small communities, we are often blind. But oh, how the insights can come when we have people who are different than us working side by side with us. I know for the Calgary Alliance, it has been actually working with the Indigenous and around issues of truth and reconciliation that has both been hard but so much richness and beauty and insight has come about because of this. And then there comes a point in which we bring all this into our public life. We allow our spirituality to become public. And you know what? We've been really fortunate over this last year to actually see how when we have this vehicle by which our spirituality becomes a collective spiritual working out of our community issues, amazing things happen. When we collectively call each other to our deeper spiritual values, things like looking after those who have been made vulnerable in our community, we witnessed how the very conversation changes. In fact, you know, with the city budget coming up in the next week, we've actually discovered that by lifting up these conversations, even the very conversations that shape our city's budget, something very tangible changes. So that it begins to be shaped, that we make sure we don't cut those things that those who are most vulnerable in our community rely on. You know, this is the power that actually all of us together, as the Calgary Alliance have shown is, and it's exciting. And trust me, there'll be dark days as well too, because you know, once you start doing any significant work, shadows appear. And that's actually how you usually know you're doing significant work. But for now, we're thankful that we've been able to have an impact together. You see, our inner spiritual life and our outer spiritual life are connected. They shape each other. And whenever we want to cut off either one half of that, either our inner transformation or our shared work of building communities and acting for justice, you can almost be sure that there is an agenda out there that is afraid of the power of the Spirit. Or there is an agenda out there that is trying to once again co-opt the power of the Spirit to serve empires. But today, let us be a part of this alternative tradition, this revival of this deeper and broader tradition, a tradition that works for justice, a tradition that loves tenderly, and a tradition that walks humbly with our God, with the Spirit, with the divine, by that which is known by many names and which unites us all. Amen.
By their fruits you will know them is a familiar biblical metaphor. What is the fruit of our behavior and our works? Let us be mindful in our works and in our giving that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves. Please give as generously as you are able.
My few final thoughts with deep, deep gratitude, Ryan. Thank you for your message this morning and for that romp through Christian history as well. I too have been wrestling with this individualism versus the collective. This is work that we have to do together to bring a new world into being, to contribute what we can, each and every one of us. And I love that idea that when the shadow shows up, it means you're doing good work, because I certainly experienced that as well. And now let us sing this hope into being. With our closing song, We Are Building a New Way. As we come to the end of this time of public worship together, as I prepare to extinguish the light of our chalice, inviting you to take its light within you, let us be reminded that this is the message of our faith: to act with passion in the face of injustice, to love with courage in the midst of life's pain. This is the meaning of our chalice. May it empower our hearts until we are together again. And with this, I extinguish our chalice. And I invite Jane to take us into coffee time.
Before we sing our song benediction together, yes, you're all invited to come to our virtual coffee hour. How you get there? Well, you're going to click on the red button on your screen that says leave, and the next button the next picture that will come up in your browser is a picture inviting you to coffee hour. All you have to do is click on the purple coffee cup and you're in. So we'll look forward to seeing you at coffee time. Let's sing together our sung benediction, Spirit of Life.